Preventing sexual aggression. Given the widespread occurrence of sexual aggression from adolescence onward and the lasting negative effects it has on the victims, see Chapter 9, it is clear that the development of measures for preventing sexual aggression is a key challenge for researchers and policymakers alike. Approaches aimed at reducing the risk of sexual aggression can be broadly located at the societal and the individual level. This section presents some illustrative examples from both categories. Societal measures designed to reduce sexual aggression. As with other society-level approaches, the law provides an instrument for preventing and reducing sexual aggression. Major legal changes implemented in many countries in the last decades are the introduction of marital rape as a criminal offense and the broadening of legal definitions to include male victims. For example, in the U.S., marital rape has been a criminal offense in all states since 1993, and Germany followed in 1997. As shown in Figure 12.1 earlier in this chapter, 73% of 133 countries included in a World Health Organization report have laws against rape in marriage. However, the same figure also shows that these laws are fully enforced in only 43% of countries, amounting to a substantial justice gap in the legal protection against marital rape. Whether or not making it a criminal offense reduces the prevalence of marital rape is hard to establish. Based on findings from victim surveys, it has been found that only a small proportion of sexual assaults is reported to the police and included in official crime statistics. Among this small proportion, the majority of reported cases are assaults by strangers, which correspond to the real rape stereotype described in Chapter 9, Temkin and Crahy, 2008. Based on research findings that about 1 in 4 women studying at higher education institutions in the U.S. is likely to experience sexual violence, legal measures known as Title IX have been tightened to reduce the rate of sexual assault among college students. Title IX is part of the Education Amendments Act of 1972 and states, "No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." Universities are obliged to take immediate and effective steps to end sexual harassment and sexual violence. To meet this obligation, procedures for reporting, investigating, and adjudicating complaints of sexual aggression have been implemented at universities and colleges nationwide, and there is evidence that more comprehensive policies are linked to lower prevalence rates of campus sexual assault. Other measures at the societal or community level seek to influence established risk factors by changing the social context that allows sexual violence to occur. For a discussion of society-level risk factors, see Chapter 9. Drawing on research on the links between alcohol use and sexual aggression, enforcing stricter observation of age limits on the sale of alcohol could be a possible measure for reducing the likelihood of sexual aggression. For example, a study of 524 colleges and universities found that sexual assault rates were significantly higher in institutions that allowed students to possess alcohol on campus than in institutions where this was not allowed. Similarly, as we saw in Chapter 6, there is considerable evidence that exposure to violent pornography is linked to a higher risk of engaging in sexually aggressive behavior. This suggests that restricting access to violent pornography, especially for an underage audience, could contribute to the prevention of sexual aggression. Although such measures have been adopted as part of youth protection legislation and policies, E.G. Hinkson, 2010, there is a shortage of rigorous evaluations of their effectiveness in reducing the rate of sexual aggression. A further societal response to the problem of rape and other sexual offenses is to address the low conviction rates in the criminal prosecution by implementing changes in the treatment of rape victims by the police and the medical system. Although these measures are directed in the first instance at survivors of sexual assault, they are also intended to have a wider effect on increasing reporting rates by removing the expectation of secondary victimization by police and medical staff as a barrier to reporting. In the UK, specialized sexual assault referral centers, SARCs, were introduced to better meet the needs of victims and improve the chances of criminal prosecution, and further recommendations for change were made in an independent report to the government, Stern 2010. In the U.S., initiatives have been developed to ensure that sexual assault victims are examined by specialized teams, such as sexual assault nurse examiners, the SANE program, to secure vital evidence to increase the number of cases progressing through the criminal justice system, Campbell et al., 2014. Individual-level approaches to the prevention of sexual aggression. Targeting the individual, primary rape prevention programs have been directed at potential perpetrators, victims, and bystanders. Interventions targeting men are called rape education programs, and interventions targeting women are called risk reduction programs. Findings from evaluation studies suggest that these programs are best implemented in single-sex groups. A third group of interventions are designed to promote the willingness of bystanders to intervene in situations that entail the risk of a sexual assault. Many studies have been conducted over the last 2 decades to address the effectiveness of rape prevention programs, especially for reducing sexual assault among college students. See aggro et al. 2014 for a review. Rape education programs are designed to reduce the acceptance of rape myths, highlight the importance of consent, and alter the perceived social norms that sexual aggression is common and accepted among same-age peers. They are directed primarily at men, and participation is mandatory for students entering university in many places. Program duration is usually short, ranging from a single session to a total of 3 to 4 sessions. An overview of the key components of rape education programs directed at men is provided by ch12 et al. 2018 and presented in Figure 12.2. The key constructs targeted are the promotion of empathy, the teaching of skills, such as negotiating consent, and the correction of misperceptions about sexual assault. The immediate effects of the intervention are changes in psychological risk factors for sexual aggression perpetration, such as adherence to traditional gender roles and rape supportive attitudes, and promoting skills for intervening as bystanders. The ultimate criterion of success is the reduction of sexual aggression perpetration in the groups that received the training. In terms of reducing rape myth acceptance, defined as beliefs about sexual aggression that serve to deny, downplay, or justify sexually aggressive behavior that men commit against women, a meta-analysis by Flores and Hartlaub, 1998, found evidence for short-term reductions in rape myth acceptance, and later studies have confirmed this finding. Some studies have shown that the effects of the programs are stronger for participants with high initial levels of rape myth acceptance. However, the results are less encouraging with regard to the sustainability of intervention effects. Rape myth acceptance is typically measured immediately before and after participation in the intervention, with some studies including follow-ups up to 2 months post-intervention. The reviews concluded that the effects tended to disappear within a few weeks post-intervention, with attitudes returning to pre-intervention levels. Figure 12.2. Elements of rape education programs directed at men. Okay, so you have the columns of program types, key components, and intermediate and primary outcomes. So for empathy-based programs, the key components are understanding the conditions of sexual consent and increasing men's empathy regarding the effects of sexual assault. The intermediate outcome is reduce ascription to traditional gender norms, and the primary outcome is decreased rate of perpetration of sexual violence among men. For skills-based programs, the key components are increasing awareness of risk for aggressive behavior and increasing men's use of bystander strategies in risky situations. The intermediate outcomes are reduced rape supportive attitudes, which leads to the primary outcome of increased engagement in proactive bystander behavior during inappropriate dating and social situations. For social norms-based programs, the key components are increasing men's use of bystander strategies in risky situations and correcting misperceptions regarding sexual behavior through provision of social norms, The intermediate outcomes are increased bystander intervention skills, and the primary outcome is increased engagement in proactive bystander behavior during inappropriate dating and social situations. In addition to challenging the belief in rape myths, prevention programs have been directed at changing social norms about sexual violence. Several studies have shown that men are susceptible to normative information about the acceptance and perpetration of sexual aggression among their peers. For example, Edwards and Vogel 2015 found that men's exposure to messages indicating that most young men accepted sexual violence in certain situations reported a greater likelihood of engaging in sexual aggression compared with men exposed to anti-rape messages. The social norms approach seeks to counter the rape-supportive normative environment by engaging men as social justice allies, both in terms of challenging misperceptions and in promoting active intervention to stop other men from engaging in sexual aggression. A study by Zalome and Wong, 2019, presented male students with the information that a high percentage of men in general norms, e.g., 89.1% of men agree that verbal resistance shows a lack of legitimate agreement to sexual activity, or of students at their own university, local norms, rejected sexual assault and rape supportive beliefs. Men in both norms conditions indicated a lower likelihood to engage in sexual aggression than did men in a control condition, who were presented with general statistics about their university unrelated to sexual aggression. The effect was stronger for men with a prior history of sexual aggression. Overall, the existing evidence suggests that belief interventions directed at men may be successful in reducing rape-supportive attitudes. However, meta-analytic reviews on the ability of rape prevention programs to reduce men's perpetration of sexual aggression have found little evidence of their effectiveness in reducing sexual aggression perpetration. DeGroot et al. 2014. A second line of intervention research has examined the effectiveness of risk reduction programs directed at women. The core elements of these programs, as summarized by Orchowski et al. 2018, are presented in Figure 12.3. The main outcome variable is the reduction in the likelihood of sexual victimization, but further aims are added to reduce the fear of sexual assault and strengthen coping skills in the event of an assault. Broadly speaking, rape resistance programs address two main aspects: increasing women's awareness and understanding of the factors that increase the vulnerability to sexual aggression, and enabling them to engage in more effective resistance when faced with a situation in which a sexual assault may be imminent. For example, understanding that most sexual assaults are committed by someone known to the victim may increase women's sensitivity to warning signs in interactions with dates, acquaintances, and partners. Based on evidence on the critical role of alcohol in impairing the recognition of risk cues and predicting sexual victimization, interventions have targeted a reduction in women's alcohol consumption and were found to be effective in reducing victimization rates in women with problematic drinking behavior. Moreover, self-defense trainings for women have been shown to reduce the risk of assault. An example of a rape resistance program is the Enhanced Assess, Acknowledge, Act (EAAA) program, which combines the promotion of risk awareness, assess, e.g. the role of alcohol, risk assessment, acknowledge, e.g. the identification of warning signs, and protective action, ACT, knowledge about effective resistance strategies. EAAA also contains a module on sex and relationships, in which participants apply the knowledge gained in the first three modules to their own intimate and sexual relationships. In an evaluation of program effectiveness over a follow-up period of 24 months, Sen et al. 2017 found that program participants had a higher confidence in their ability to defend themselves in a sexual attack, had a better knowledge of effective resistance strategies, rejected rape myths and victim blaming to a greater extent, and were less likely to experience attempted rape compared with a control group. The likelihood of experiencing a completed rape was reduced up to 18 months post-intervention, but was no longer significantly lower after 24 months. Figure 12.3 Elements of rape resistance programs directed at women. So there are key components, intermediate outcomes, and primary individual outcomes. So the key components are sexual assault information, personally relevant expanded definitions of sexual assault and risk factors, discussion and modeling of strategies for effectively deterring threat, physical, emotional, and verbal, practice in using self-defense strategies, discussion of strategies for setting boundaries in risky and everyday situations, expanding knowledge about sexual desires and relationship values and negotiation skills, discussion of barriers to acknowledging risk and resistance with practice in identifying personal barriers. The key components lead to intermediate outcomes, which are increased personal relevance, labeling of behaviors constituting sexual assault, increased recognition of risk factors in men's behaviors and situations, decreased adherence to rape myths, increased knowledge of resistance strategies, increased skills in resistance strategies, increased self-efficacy in self-defense, and increased perceived control, increased assertiveness, decrease in self-silencing, decrease in reaction time to respond to sexual coercion, and change in gender expectations, and increased use of resistance strategies, decreased reaction time to respond to sexual assault attempts, which leads to primary individual outcomes, decrease in victimization, decrease in fear, decrease in self-survivor blame, increased disclosure and reporting of the assault, increased healing and recovery, primary broad outcomes, increased healthy social norms, decreased rates of perpetration. In addition to the education of potential perpetrators and empowerment of potential victims, promoting bystander intervention has also been explored as an effective way of preempting sexual aggression. The elements of bystander interventions are summarized by Orchowski et al. 2018 as presented in Figure 12.4. Bystander intervention approaches seek to increase individuals' ability to detect situations involving a risk of sexual assault for others and their willingness to step in. Research in the field of prosocial behavior has identified obstacles that prevent bystanders from helping people in need, such as a diffusion of responsibility, the failure to correctly interpret the situation, pluralistic ignorance, and the fear of negative responses from others in the case of taking action, Latney and Darley, 1970. Thus, these obstacles need to be addressed in programs to promote bystander intervention. Several recent reviews have concluded that existing interventions are effective in increasing participants' willingness to intervene. However, there is no conclusive evidence so far that bystander intervention programs are able to reduce the prevalence of sexual assault perpetration. Figure 12.4 Elements of bystander intervention programs for preventing sexual aggression. So there are key components which lead to intermediate outcomes which lead to primary outcomes. The key components are raise awareness regarding what constitutes abusive behavior, promote community support for taking action to address violence, model and practice bystander intervention skills, increase awareness of potential barriers to intervention, and correcting misperceptions regarding sexual behavior through provision of social norms, which leads to the intermediate outcomes of increased labeling of problematic behaviors as abusive, increased confidence in intervention, reduced perceived barriers to intervention, increased positive attitudes towards bystander intervention, and increased likelihood to intervene, which leads to the primary outcomes of shift community norms to demonstrate increased collective efficacy in addressing violence, increased engagement in proactive bystander intervention during appropriate dating and social situations, and reduced rates of violence. To conclude, research on effective strategies for reducing sexual assault has intensified in recent years, especially with regard to the prevalence on college campuses. There is no standard curriculum for rape prevention efforts, and the effectiveness varies between programs. Programs targeting potential perpetrators, victims, and bystanders have largely been conducted in separate strands despite overlapping goals and components, which has led Orchowski et al. 2018 to call for a better integrated, comprehensive approach to sexual assault prevention. In addition to examining changes in attitudes, such as rape myth acceptance, and behaviors, such as alcohol consumption, an increasing number of studies has examined a reduction in prevalence rates as the key outcome. Although there is still a shortage of rigorously designed evaluation studies, the knowledge base on what works and what doesn't to reduce the scale of sexual violence is growing steadily.